Well, let me tell you generally where I think logistics professionals have failed for as long as I've been in this business, and I got my PhD from Ohio State in 1975. I think senior logistics executives in companies have focused on service improvements and cost reductions or asset efficiencies. And because those service improvements have not been translated into revenue enhancements, that what top management has been trained to do is look for how much you've saved this year. You know, how much did the freight bill go down? How many warehouses did you get rid of? What reductions in inventory have taken place? And when you're inefficient, those dollars are hard to find. But the better you get, the harder it is to match past savings. I think the mistake that's been made, excuse me, the mistake that's been made is that it's difficult to try to turn those service improvements into revenue enhancements, and so executives have not done that. And I can think of many logistics innovations that have been great, but the salespeople in the marketing organization didn't understand the value proposition, didn't sell it to the customer, in fact, had marketing programs that were actually counter to the great logistics innovation, right? Like Whirlpool's Quality Express, designed to deliver in 24 to 48 hours appliances to dealers anywhere in the United States. We looked at a number of these dealers 6 years after Quality Express was in place, and many of them weren't doing any better in inventory turns than they were 6 years before. Some were doing marginally better. None of them were getting the kinds of returns that I think a great program like Quality Express should have delivered. The primary reason was the salespeople still went out and offered deals on truckloads of appliances.
Let me ask you this. There's obviously, you have a rich and deep history in building logistics knowledge, and then this thing called SCM came along. Where does logistics fit in supply chain management or vice versa? Okay,
now you've hit a hot one with me. I've got a group of companies that support a research center here at Ohio State that we call the Global Supply Chain Forum. There are 15 companies in total. When I first put the group together in '92, the idea was that if I had the right organizations, and more important than the right organizations, the right individuals from those organizations, they'd lead us the right way in terms of our research. We'd work on problems that they thought were critical for their long-term success, and consequently they'd be problems that everybody faced. The first thing they wanted us to work on was a way of identifying how to develop and implement more partnering type relationships with suppliers and customers. They said, we're just not good at this. We get involved in relationships, we're excited about them at the beginning, they end up being bad marriages that end in divorce more times than not. So if we could find out how to replicate the successes and avoid the failures, that this would be good research. In 1994, we came up with a definition of supply chain management, and for the last 8 years, we've really been pushing hard to build the framework. In our view, supply chain management is not the new name for logistics. It's not logistics that includes suppliers and customers, because CLM made it clear in '86 when they defined logistics instead of physical distribution management, that logistics was material flow and information flow from point of origin to point of consumption. No executive would be foolish enough to believe that point of origin is when it shows up on his dock, and point of consumption is when the product is shipped. So clearly, the CLM always viewed logistics properly implemented as a multi-firm supply chain, if you wish, implementation. Now, there are still others that have changed the name of their purchasing programs to supply chain management. There are others that have changed the names of operations programs to supply chain management, and yet others who have taken purchasing and operations and logistics together and called that supply chain management. We've offered a course for the last 4 years in the fall here at Ohio State on our framework of supply chain management. We offered it for the first time last year at the undergraduate level, and I went into that class. We offered it as a special topics course 694. And I said, why did you sign up for this course? What do you think it is? And I got some answers. And then I said, well, let's go at this another way. What's a supply chain? And a young guy put up his hand and he said, well, a supply chain moves things. And I said, no, that's what it does. What is it? And we went through 3 or 4 more like this, where they said something. I said, no, that's what it does. What is it? So finally, I asked them if any of them had seen the Jack Nicholson movie Anger Management, where the guy's in anger management class. Nicholson is the psychiatrist, and he asks them who he is. And the fellow wants to say what he does for a living. And Jack Nicholson pushes him and says, no, who are you? And he talks about what he likes to do on the weekend. Nicholson pushes him some more. And he got mad and proved he needed to be in anger management class. So the class all had a laugh. And then the young man who first said that a supply chain moves things said a supply chain is the companies that you buy from and the companies that you sell to. We talked some more, and we decided that some of those companies you buy from also have suppliers, and they might have suppliers, and likewise there might be more than one company between you and the end consumer. We also talked about how sometimes a supplier might be a customer. Texas Instruments sells to Avnet. Texas Instruments buys from Avnet, a distributor. So at the end of the discussion, we decided that a supply chain was a network of companies. So then I said, forget network of companies. Think about one company. What kind of skills, what kind of functional expertise do you need to manage one company? And so we went to the board and we wrote down what they said. Marketing. We need finance. We need new product development. We need purchasing. We need logistics. We need operations. We need human resources. And I said, okay, now, if it takes all of that to manage one company, what do you suppose it takes to manage a whole network of companies? And bright young kids that they were, they said at least all of that. And so that's our view of supply chain management, that just as you wouldn't try to manage one company with only purchasing and operations and logistics, no marketing, no finance, right? No new product development and commercialization. How can you manage a whole network of companies with 3 business functions involved? So in our view, supply chain management is the implementation of 8 cross-functional processes, and that every business function needs to be involved in these processes or there'll be failures. So the processes are customer relationship management. Customer relationship management is the structure for how we manage relationships with customers and would include a key account component. I'm going to have some customers that are more important than others, right? The 80-20 rule, if you will. 80% of my revenue is going to come from 20% of my customers. Except if I look at profitability of those customers, it's going to be even more skewed. Maybe 90% of my profits come from 5 or 10% of my customers. Now, for customers this important, I don't want one salesperson talking to one buyer, because no matter how good that salesperson is, no matter how good that buyer is, they can't possibly adequately represent the complexity of these 2 organizations, right? So I want the salesperson to be the relationship manager on one side. I want the buyer on the other side to be relationship manager. And I want to have logistics people talking to logistics people, finance people talking to finance people, marketing people interacting, R&D people working with R&D people in the customer location. So it's Marzetti, R&D working on promotional sauces with the R&D people at Wendy's. Okay? Now, the mirror image of customer relationship management is supplier relationship management. I've got some suppliers who are disproportionately important to my success. So the links in the supply chain, we believe, are the CRM process of the seller linking up with the supplier relationship management process of the buyer. The other 6 processes are coordinated through those 2, and the other 6 would include customer service management, demand management, order fulfillment, manufacturing flow, new product development and commercialization, and returns management. So again, our view of supply chain management is that it's these 8 processes. These are the 8 processes around which every business should be structured, and that each business function has to be involved in the planning of those processes. If you leave any of them out, you end up with failures like that Whirlpool one, where you've got a great logistics innovation. The marketing people have never understood it, nor have they bought in. And so they're out there doing things that are counter to the logistics initiative. So while something like order fulfillment would require all of the business functions involved in order to plan the process, the actual activities of filling the order would take place primarily in logistics, right? It's in the logistics organization that we would have the warehouses. It's in the logistics organization that we would manage the inventories. It's in the logistics organization where we would make decisions about transportation. So you hear oftentimes people talk about knock down the silos, obliterate the silos, but it's rubbish because work's done in the silos. And in fact, if I'm a manufacturer like 3M, relationships with the end consumer, or Colgate, or any of these consumer goods companies, the relationship with the end consumer would be managed in the marketing function. But when I start talking about managing relationships with customers that are business-to-business customers, I need cross-functional team involvement.
Okay. Peter Drucker once said the aim of marketing is to make selling superfluous. Do you think that the aim of SCM is to make logistics superfluous?
No. Again, in our view, supply chain management is the implementation of these 8 cross-functional processes, and that logistics, like every other function, needs to be on the team. And when I pull people out of these functions to serve on the cross-functional teams, what they bring is functional expertise to the process. When they go back to their jobs then in the function, they take process thinking and make those functions less silo-like. Okay? So I don't see any of the business functions going away. I don't think there's anything wrong with what we've been teaching in logistics. What I really think is wrong is people renaming their logistics books supply chain management books. To me, that's not progress.
Now, a great deal has been said about all the technologies, emerging technologies. Of course, there have always been technologies. One is this idea of RFID. How big a role is RFID in what's happening in terms of supply chain management?
Well, it's not much yet, but it could have significant potential, primarily in terms of visibility of where the inventory is.
You think
if it's not on the shelf in the retail store, is it in the back room? If it's not in the back room, is it in the trailer on the way?
Do you think there are any dangers of RFID?
I don't see them.
So to you, the consumer privacy, this is just not an issue?
Well, I mean, that assumes that technology is so good you can trace this thing beyond the store. I mean, you can only trace, or you can only read things within a certain specified distance of a reader, and it's not across town. So I think, I think much of the consumer privacy issues are overblown.
But you've seen a lot of transformation in terms of the early technologies, and you've gone through the period of MRP and ERP and all the way to this emergence of RFID. Does technology drive logistics, or does logistics drive technology? How does that whole relationship work?
Well, we could talk about it in terms of our processes. You hear stories of companies spending $40 million on CRM software, customer relationship management, or $100 million, and how it was a failure. They didn't get a return on their investment. It's because they didn't have a process in place. They bought the technology as a solution. So I think strategy always has to come first, whether it be technology for logistics. Strategy and process come ahead of the technology. The technology is an enabler. And with no strategy in place, it's no surprise that money would be wasted.